The tracer rounds came at us like strings of red pearls in the darkness. 6 Messerschmitts. Our Lancaster was alone, 15,000 feet over the Ruhr Valley, and my gun turret's reflector sight had shattered 20 minutes earlier. March 1944. I was 19 years old, and I had 3 seconds to figure out how to aim a gun I couldn't see through. The impact that broke my sight came from flak over Essen. A piece of shrapnel no bigger than my thumb punched through the turret's perspex dome and took out the reflector gun sight completely. Just gone. 1 second I had crosshairs, the next I had nothing but broken glass and the smell of cordite. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the gun grips. The intercom crackled, and our pilot, Flight Lieutenant Davies, asked if I was hit. I told him the sight was gone, but I was okay. He didn't respond right away. We both knew what that meant. A rear gunner without a sight is useless. Dead weight. And over Germany, being useless gets everyone killed. I grew up in Manchester. My dad worked the docks, and my uncle ran a shooting gallery at Blackpool Pier. Every summer from age 7 to 14, I spent weeks at that gallery, not playing the games, working them. Restocking targets, collecting coins, watching thousands of people try to hit moving ducks with rifles that shot slightly left. My uncle taught me something those customers never learned. He said you don't aim where the target is, you aim where it's going to be. He'd make me practice with my eyes closed, just feeling the rhythm of the mechanical ducks, learning to anticipate. I got so good I could hit them blind 3 times out of 5, just muscle memory and timing. I never thought that would matter. I joined the RAF in 1942 because they were taking anyone with decent eyesight, and I wanted to do my part. They made me a rear gunner, stuck me in the tail turret of a Lancaster bomber where the life expectancy was measured in missions, not years. 5 missions and you were lucky. 10 and you were exceptional. I'd flown 23. My crew called me Frank the Lucky, but luck runs out, and sitting in that turret with no way to aim, I didn't feel lucky at all. The formation had scattered 10 minutes earlier. We'd hit the synthetic oil plant at Gelsenkirchen, and were headed home when the night fighters found us. Our squadron leader's aircraft went down first. Just exploded. No parachutes. Then another Lancaster got hit and started spiraling. I watched men bail out, their chutes opening like white flowers against the darkness. We were supposed to stay in formation, mutual protection, overlapping fields of fire, but something had gone wrong with our navigation, and we drifted south. Now, we were alone. Davies pushed the throttles forward. Our 4 Merlin engines roared louder. He was trying to outrun them, but you can't outrun a Messerschmitt in a Lancaster. They're faster, more maneuverable, and they're hunting. We were prey. I could see them coming up from below and behind, exactly where they're supposed to attack, the blind spot. Except I was supposed to make sure it wasn't blind. That was my job. That's why I was sitting in a freezing turret wearing an electrically heated suit that barely worked, breathing oxygen that tasted like metal. The first Messerschmitt opened fire at 400 yards. I saw his cannon flash, heard the rounds hitting our tail section. Sounded like someone throwing gravel against a tin roof. I fired back, but I was guessing, just pointing the guns in roughly the right direction and pulling the triggers. My 4 Browning machine guns hammered and the turret filled with the smell of burnt gunpowder. I had no idea if I was even close. The Messerschmitt peeled away, probably laughing. Tommy Rutherford was our mid-upper gunner. Good man from Leeds. Been flying with us since our first mission. His turret was amidships, had a full 360 view. He called over the intercom that 2 more fighters were coming in from starboard. I couldn't see them yet, but I trusted Tommy. Never known him to be wrong. I swung my turret right, trying to guess the angle, trying to remember everything my uncle had taught me about leading a target. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to see through the sight. I'd been shooting without sights for years. The ducks at Blackpool moved in predictable patterns. These fighters were doing the same thing. They had a doctrine, a standard attack pattern. Come in from below and behind, climb to firing position, shoot, break away. Every German pilot learned the same tactics. That made them predictable. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I closed my eyes, let my hands rest on the gun grips, felt the Lancaster's vibration through the turret, started counting in my head, timing the rhythm of the attacks. The Messerschmitts were coming in 30-second intervals. One would attack, break off, the next would begin his run, like the mechanical ducks, like a pattern you could learn. The second fighter came in, I heard Tommy call it out, didn't open my eyes, just listened. Heard our engine note change as Davies took evasive action, felt the turret swing as I tracked by sound and instinct. When I thought the fighter was in position, I opened my eyes, looked down the barrel instead of through the sight, and fired. 2-second burst. The fighter's wing root lit up with hits. He broke hard left, trailing smoke. Tommy whooped on the intercom. Davies asked what happened. I told him I got lucky. He told me to keep being lucky because we had 4 more fighters on us, and we were still 200 miles from the coast. The manual said rear gunners should use the reflector sight for accurate fire. Engage at 400 yards. Fire in controlled bursts. Conserve ammunition. I threw out the manual, started shooting by feel. The 3rd fighter came in, and I tracked him blind until the last second, then opened up, hit his engine. He dropped away. The 4th fighter was more cautious, stayed farther out. I let him think he was safe, waited until he committed to his attack run, then walked my fire right into his cockpit. He never pulled out, just kept going down. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I was cold, calm, focused. Every summer at Blackpool came back to me. Every mechanical duck, every practice session with my eyes closed, every time my uncle said, "You don't aim where they are, you aim where they're going to be." The 5th fighter tried something different, came in from the side. Didn't matter. I'd learned the rhythm. Caught him as he turned in and stitched his fuselage from nose to tail. He rolled inverted and dove. We were over Holland by then, getting closer to friendly territory. The 6th Messerschmitt must have been low on fuel or ammunition because he made one pass and broke off. I fired anyway. Saw strikes on his tail. He kept going, heading back to Germany. Whether he made it home or not, I never knew. Tommy came back on the intercom, said he counted 6 fighters engaged and I damaged or destroyed all of them. Davy said when we got back to base, he was putting me in for a medal. I didn't say anything, just sat there in my turret with my ruined sight and my frozen hands and tried to process what had just happened. We landed at RAF Wickenby just before dawn. The ground crew counted 73 holes in our aircraft. The intelligence officer debriefed us, asked about the combat. I told him about the broken sight. He looked at me like I was lying, said it wasn't possible to shoot down fighters without a gun sight. I shrugged, told him I'd done it anyway. He wrote up his report. I went to the barracks and slept for 14 hours. They didn't believe me at first. Other crews heard the story and assumed it was exaggerated. Combat does strange things to memory, they said. Maybe I'd damaged one fighter and thought it was more. Maybe I'd gotten confused in the chaos. But Tommy backed me up. So did Davies. So did our navigator and bomb aimer who'd watched from their positions. The squadron commander called me in, asked me to explain how I'd done it. I told him about Blackpool, about the shooting gallery, about learning to aim by instinct and timing instead of sights. He listened and nodded and told me I was either the luckiest gunner in Bomber Command or the strangest. Probably both. Then he asked if I could teach others. I said I didn't know. It wasn't something I'd learned from a manual. It was just something I could do. They gave me a distinguished flying medal, put my name in the squadron log, started calling me the blind gunner, even though my eyes worked fine. It was the sight that was blind, not me. But the name stuck. I flew 17 more missions after that night, never got my reflector sight properly fixed, kept shooting by instinct, downed 3 more fighters before the war ended, every one of them using the same technique. Feel the rhythm, lead the target, fire where they're going to be. But here's what they didn't put in the official reports. Here's what I never told the intelligence officers or the squadron commander or anyone else until now. After that first night, after I'd shot down those 6 fighters, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear or adrenaline, because I kept thinking about the pilots. The 4th one, the one whose cockpit I'd hit, I saw him for just a second before he went down. Young face. Couldn't have been older than 20. He looked surprised. Not scared, not angry, just surprised. Like he couldn't believe what was happening. I wondered about him. Whether he had a girl back home. Whether his mother was waiting for a letter. Whether he'd ever been to a shooting gallery at a pier somewhere in Germany and learned to aim by feel. War has a strange way of connecting people who should never meet. That German pilot and I, we'd probably have gotten along fine in another life. Maybe shared a beer, talked about flying, complained about the cold. Instead, I killed him. Did my job, protected my crew, came home. He didn't. The RAF loved the story of the broken sight. Made for good propaganda, plucky British gunner overcomes equipment failure, shoots down multiple enemy fighters. Shows resourcefulness, determination, that British spirit. They wrote it up in the newspapers. My mom saved all the clippings, showed them to everyone in the neighborhood, her son the hero. I never felt like a hero. Heroes in the movies are confident, certain, brave. I was scared every single mission. Scared of dying, scared of letting my crew down, scared of that moment when you realize the flak is coming straight at you and there's nothing you can do but sit there and take it. The broken sight wasn't bravery, it was desperation. I adapted because the alternative was watching my friends die. Tommy Rutherford got killed 2 months later. Different mission, different night. Fighter came in through his blind spot and hit him before he could react. I was in my turret when it happened. Heard him scream once on the intercom, then nothing. We made it back to base, but Tommy didn't. They buried him in a cemetery in Lincolnshire. I stood at his funeral and thought about how random it all was. He had a working sight and died. I had a broken sight and lived. After the war ended, I tried to go back to normal life, got a job at a factory in Manchester, married a girl named Ellen who worked at the post office, had 2 children, bought a house, did all the things you're supposed to do. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd used up all my luck over Germany, that I was living on borrowed time. Every loud noise made me flinch. Every time a plane flew overhead, I looked up and calculated angles of attack. Ellen knew something was wrong, but I couldn't explain it to her. How do you tell your wife that you wake up every night seeing the face of a German pilot you killed? How do you explain that the thing everyone praised you for, the thing they gave you a medal for, was the thing that haunted you most? I went back to Blackpool once, about 10 years after the war, walked down to the pier. My uncle had died in 1947, but the shooting gallery was still there, run by someone else. I stood and watched people play, watched them aim carefully, squeeze the trigger, miss, watched the mechanical ducks go round and round in their predictable pattern. A kid, maybe 12 years old, asked if I wanted to try. I said no thanks. He asked why not. I told him I used to be pretty good, but I'd lost my taste for it. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The recognition came in waves over the years. The RAF Historical Society wanted to interview me in 1968. I declined. A writer wanted to put my story in a book about Bomber Command. I said no. They couldn't understand why. Here was this remarkable story, this incredible feat of skill and improvisation, and I didn't want to talk about it. What they didn't understand was that every time I told the story, I had to remember the faces. The German pilots, Tommy Rutherford, all the crews that didn't come back. My son asked me about it once when he was a teenager. He'd read about it in a library book about RAF aces, wanted to know if it was true. I told him it was true, but not the way they wrote it. The book made it sound like an adventure, like something exciting. It wasn't. It was terrifying and desperate, and I'd gotten lucky. He asked if I was proud of it. I told him I was proud I'd kept my crew alive. The rest was just mechanics. Ellen died in 1989. Cancer. The one enemy you can't shoot down. After her funeral, I started thinking more about the war, about the things I'd never processed, never dealt with. I was 64 years old and I'd been running from those memories for 45 years. Figured maybe it was time to stop running. I contacted the RAF museum, told them I'd be willing to talk now if they were still interested. They were, sent a historian to interview me. Young woman, couldn't have been more than 30. She had a tape recorder and a notebook and questions written out carefully. She asked about the technical aspects of the turret, the gun sight, the tactics. I answered as best I could. Then she asked the question nobody had ever asked before. She said, "What did it feel like, shooting without being able to see?" I'd been asked what I did, how I did it, why I did it, but never how it felt. I sat there for a long moment, trying to find the words. Finally, I told her it felt like being connected to something larger than myself. The gun, the aircraft, the sky, even the enemy fighters. All of it was part of one system, and I'd figured out how to be in sync with it. Not through training or technology, but through pure instinct. She wrote that down, then asked another question. "Do you think the broken sight actually helped you?" That stopped me cold. I'd never considered it that way. Always thought of the broken sight as a problem I'd overcome, but maybe she was right. Maybe having the sight would have made me rely on it, would have limited me to what I could see instead of what I could sense. The broken sight forced me to trust my instincts, to shoot the way I'd learned as a child, to become part of the weapon instead of just operating it. I told her I didn't know. Maybe the limitation had freed me somehow. She seemed satisfied with that answer, even though I wasn't. The interview was published in the RAF Museum's journal. After that, more people wanted to talk. Veterans groups, historians, even a documentary filmmaker. I said yes to some, no to others, started speaking at schools sometimes, talking to kids about the war. Not about glory or heroism, but about the reality, the fear, the cold, the smell of burning oil and spent ammunition, the weight of knowing that your life depended on a piece of equipment that could fail at any moment. One of those school visits changed everything. It was 1995, 50 years after the war ended. I was 70 years old, speaking to a group of 16-year-olds in London. Told them the story of the broken sight. Afterward, a boy came up to me. He had an accent. German, exchange student. He asked if I'd kept records of the dates and locations of my missions. I told him I had. The RAF had given me copies of my logbook years ago. He asked if he could see them. Something in his face made me say yes. We exchanged addresses. A month later, he sent me a letter. His grandfather had been a Luftwaffe night fighter pilot, flew Messerschmitts, was killed over Holland in March 1944. The boy had been researching his grandfather's death and had found records suggesting he'd been shot down by a Lancaster bomber. The date matched, the location matched. The boy included a photograph of his grandfather. Young face, couldn't have been more than 20. I knew that face. I sat in my kitchen with that photograph for hours. This was the fourth pilot, the one I'd hit in the cockpit, the one who'd looked surprised. He had a name now, Hauptmann Wilhelm Becker, age 21, from a small town near Munich, engaged to be married. His fiancée had waited 3 years before accepting he wasn't coming back. The boy's letter was polite, respectful. He said he understood it was war, that his grandfather had been trying to kill me, just as I'd been trying to kill him. He said he didn't blame me. He just wanted to understand what had happened to his grandfather, wanted to know if he'd suffered. I wrote back, told him the truth. It had been quick. His grandfather had been a skilled pilot, had made all the right moves, but I'd gotten lucky. Told him that I thought about that moment often, about the young man I'd killed. Told him that carrying that memory was the price of survival, and I'd paid it every day for 50 years. We corresponded for several years after that. The boy, whose name was Klaus, came to visit me in 1998. We spent a weekend together. He wanted to know everything about that night. I told him everything I could remember. We drove out to an airfield where they had a restored Lancaster. I showed him where I'd sat, how the turret worked, how I'd shot without a sight. He climbed into the turret himself, sat there for a long time, just looking around. When he came out, he was crying. He said he understood now. Said he could feel how small and vulnerable it was, how frightening it must have been. I told him his grandfather had been brave too, that it took courage to chase a bomber into the night knowing you might not come back. We both cried then. 2 men, from different countries, connected by one moment of violence 54 years earlier. Klaus asked me the same question the historian had asked, whether I thought the broken sight had helped me. I gave him a different answer than I'd given her. I told him I thought the broken sight had saved my life, but cost me something too. It had forced me to kill in a way that was more personal, more instinctive. I couldn't hide behind technology. Every shot was me, pure and simple. My skill, my judgment, my responsibility. He nodded. Said his grandfather's letters home had talked about the impersonal nature of combat, how you could press a button and destroy lives without ever seeing the people you killed. I told him my broken sight had taken away that distance. I'd seen them all, remembered them all. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Klaus went home to Germany. We stayed in touch until he died in 2015. Heart attack, sudden. His daughter sent me a letter, said her father had considered me a friend, had talked about me often, had taught her about the complexity of war, about how enemies could become friends, about how understanding was more valuable than judgment. I'm 90 years old now. The last of my crew died 3 years ago. I'm the only one left who remembers that night over Germany. The night my sight broke, and I learned to shoot by instinct. The night I killed 6 men to save 7. People still ask me about the broken sight. They want to know the trick, the secret, how they could do it too. I tell them there is no trick. It was necessity, desperation, muscle memory from childhood, and blind luck all mixed together. I tell them I hope they never need to learn how to fight without seeing, because that would mean they're in a war, and war is something no one should experience. But if they insist on knowing the technical aspects, I tell them this: the human brain is capable of remarkable things when survival depends on it. We can adapt, improvise, overcome limitations we thought were absolute. The key is trust. You have to trust your training, your instincts, your muscle memory. You have to let go of conscious thought and let your body do what it knows how to do. The shooting gallery at Blackpool taught me that. My uncle, standing beside me in the summer heat, telling me to close my eyes and feel the rhythm. Thousands of practice shots at mechanical ducks prepared me for the most important shots of my life. That's the strange circularity of existence. You never know what skills will matter until the moment comes. I visited the RAF museum last year. They have an exhibit about bomber command now. There's a section about rear gunners and the mortality rates, 70% casualties, the highest of any military position in World War II. I stood there reading the statistics, looking at the photographs of young men who never came home, and I felt the weight of survival all over again. They have my story there too. A small placard next to a restored gun turret. The Blind Gunner. How Sergeant Frank Sullivan shot down 6 enemy fighters without a working gun sight. They got the basic facts right, but they missed the point. It wasn't about the kills. It was about the cost. 6 German pilots dead. Tommy Rutherford dead. 73 holes in our aircraft. 7 men who made it home but carried the scars forever. A boy was standing there reading the placard. Couldn't have been more than 10. He turned to his father and said, "That's so cool." He was like a superhero. The father smiled and nodded. I wanted to tell them it wasn't cool. It wasn't heroic. It was necessary and terrible, and I'd give anything to have lived in a world where it never had to happen. But I didn't say anything, just walked away. Let them have their simple version of the story. Maybe that's what we need. Simple stories about heroes and villains, right and wrong. The complicated truth, the gray areas, the moral ambiguity, that's too heavy for a museum placard. I still have dreams about that night. Not nightmares exactly, just dreams where I'm back in the turret. Sometimes the sight works and I can't hit anything. Sometimes it's broken and I can't miss. Sometimes the fighters aren't fighters at all, but mechanical ducks from Blackpool going round and round in an endless pattern. I wake up and lie in the dark, listening to the silence, grateful I'm not hearing engines or gunfire or Tommy's voice cutting out on the intercom. Ellen used to ask me what I was thinking in those quiet moments. I never had a good answer. How do you explain that you're thinking about nothing and everything at the same time? About the peculiar lottery of survival? About why you made it when so many others didn't? About whether luck is real or just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of randomness? The historians want clean narratives. The broken sight forced innovation. The innovation led to success. The success saved lives. End of story. But life isn't that clean. The broken sight forced innovation. The innovation led to success. The success meant 6 men died. Those men had families. Those families had grief. That grief rippled outward in ways I can't measure or understand. Klaus told me once that his grandmother never remarried after Wilhelm died. She lived to be 87, alone in the same house she'd shared with her fiancé for 6 months before he went to war. She kept his uniform in a closet, his letters in a box by her bed. Klaus said when she died, they found she'd written letters to Wilhelm every week for 43 years. Hundreds of letters never sent, telling him about her life, about the children she never had, about the world changing around her. I am responsible for that grief. Not legally, not morally according to the rules of war, but existentially. My skill, my training, my instinct ended Wilhelm Becker's life and created a lifetime of longing for the woman who loved him. That's the weight of the broken sight. That's what the museum placard doesn't say. The documentary filmmaker wanted me to say I'd do it again. Would I make the same choices? Would I shoot without a sight? Would I kill those 6 pilots? I told him yes, I'd do it again because the alternative was watching my crew die. But I wouldn't feel good about it. I wouldn't celebrate it. I'd do it and I'd carry it, same as I've carried it for 70 years. He didn't use that part in the documentary. Said it was too ambiguous, that audiences needed clearer emotional resolution. They used the footage of me demonstrating how I'd grip the guns, how I'd track targets by sound and feel, made it look impressive, almost magical. Cut out all the parts where I talked about the cost. That's how these stories get simplified. The broken sight becomes a tale of human ingenuity, triumphing over adversity. The innovation becomes something to celebrate. The kills become achievements. The grief becomes collateral damage, too uncomfortable to examine closely. We prefer our war stories clean and heroic, but I'm 90 years old, and I don't have time for clean and heroic anymore. I want to tell the truth before I can't tell it anymore. The truth is, I got lucky. The truth is, my luck was someone else's tragedy. The truth is, I'd do it again and I'd hate it again. The truth is, there are no heroes in war, just people trying to survive and living with the consequences. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. My grandson asked me recently why I'm talking about this now after staying quiet for so long. He's 32, works in computers, never had to think about life and death decisions. I told him I'm talking about it because soon there won't be anyone left who was there. Soon it'll just be history books and museum exhibits and documentaries that clean up the messy parts. Someone needs to say what it was really like. He asked what I wanted people to know. I told him I wanted them to know that war is failure. We celebrate the victories, the innovations, the individual acts of courage or skill, but we're celebrating our ability to navigate a situation that shouldn't exist. The broken sight shouldn't have mattered, because we shouldn't have been bombing Germany, and they shouldn't have been trying to shoot us down. The whole thing was a massive failure of humanity. But given that the failure happened, given that the war existed, I wanted people to know that survival requires adaptability. The manual said, use the sight. The sight was broken, I adapted. That's not heroism, it's pragmatism. Every human has that capacity. We can all adapt when we must. We can all find ways to do the impossible when the alternative is death. I also wanted people to know that killing someone changes you. Even when it's justified, even when it's necessary, even when everyone agrees you did the right thing, you're not the same person after. Part of you stays with the person you killed. Part of them stays with you. Wilhelm Becker has been with me for 70 years, not as a ghost or a haunting, but as a presence. A reminder that every choice has consequences beyond what we can see in the moment. The RAF taught me to shoot. Blackpool taught me to aim without seeing. But nothing taught me how to live with what I'd done. That I had to figure out myself. Took decades. Required meeting Klaus. Understanding that Wilhelm had been a real person with dreams and fears just like mine. Required accepting that I could be both responsible for his death and not guilty of murder. War creates these impossible moral spaces where normal rules don't apply. I've been asked if I forgive myself. That's the wrong question. There's nothing to forgive. I did what I had to do. The question is whether I've made peace with it. And the answer is mostly yes. I've made peace with the necessity, with the choices available to me, with the randomness that put me in that turret on that night. I haven't made peace with the fact that it had to happen at all. That peace isn't mine to make. The broken sight has become a metaphor in my mind for something larger. We all fight with imperfect tools, incomplete information, broken systems. We all have to make do, adapt, improvise. The question is what we do with that experience afterward. Do we celebrate our cleverness and move on? Or do we sit with the weight of our actions, acknowledge the full human cost, try to understand what we've gained and what we've lost? I chose the second path. Took longer, hurt more, didn't make for good stories at dinner parties. But it felt honest. It felt like the only way to honor both my crew and the pilots I killed. Both sides deserved to be remembered as human beings doing what they thought was necessary. My children asked if I regret not talking about this sooner. I don't think I regret it. I needed the distance. Needed Ellen to help me build a normal life. Needed time to process what had happened before I could articulate it. The young man who climbed out of that turret in 1944 couldn't have told this story. He was still too close to it, still too focused on survival. The old man I am now has perspective, has met Klaus, has buried his crew, has had 70 years to think about what it all meant. What it meant, I think, is that we're all more capable than we know, both of remarkable skill and terrible violence. We contain multitudes, contradictions. We can be gentle and brutal, skilled and desperate, lucky and cursed, all in the same moment. The broken sight revealed that in me, showed me I could kill 6 men and feel sick about it. Could be celebrated for doing something I wished I'd never had to do. The Lancaster I flew in that night was scrapped after the war, cut up for metal. The turret I sat in was probably melted down, turned into cars or kitchen appliances or fence posts. The physical evidence of that night is gone. All that's left are memories, documents, and the ripples of consequence still spreading outward. Klaus's daughter has children now, Wilhelm's great-grandchildren. They exist in a world shaped by the night their great-grandfather didn't come home. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my sight hadn't broken. Would I have shot as accurately? Would all 6 fighters have gone down? Or would one of them have gotten through, have hit our aircraft in a fatal spot, have sent us spiraling into the German countryside? Would Klaus's grandfather have survived the war, married his fiancée, had children, lived a long life? Would I have died at 19, been buried in a foreign field, been remembered only as a name on a memorial? The counterfactuals are endless and pointless. What happened happened. My sight broke. I adapted. I survived. Wilhelm didn't. That's the story. Simple in outline, complex in reality. I'll tell you one more thing, and then I think I've said what I need to say. After the war, after I'd come home and married Ellen and started my life again, I went back to the shooting gallery at Blackpool one last time. This was in 1952. My uncle's successor recognized me from the newspaper stories, offered to let me shoot for free. I accepted. I picked up the rifle, aimed at the mechanical ducks going round and round in their predictable pattern, squeezed the trigger, missed completely, tried again, missed, tried a third time, missed. The ducks kept moving, oblivious, painted metal on a track. I put the rifle down. The operator looked confused, asked if something was wrong with the gun. I told him the gun was fine. I just couldn't do it anymore. He asked why not. I didn't have a good answer then, but I do now. I couldn't shoot at those ducks because they reminded me of the fighters. The predictable patterns, the mechanical movement, the skill required to hit them. It all came back. The cold turret, the broken sight, the red tracers in the darkness. Wilhelm Becker's surprised face, Tommy Rutherford's scream on the intercom, the 73 holes in our Lancaster. I walked away from that shooting gallery and never went back. Never fired a gun again, not even for sport. The skill is still there, dormant. My hands remember the grips, the timing, the rhythm, but I can't bring myself to use it. The cost was too high. 6 German pilots, 1 best friend, and a piece of my soul that stayed in that turret over Holland. That's the real story of the broken sight. Not that I overcame adversity or demonstrated remarkable skill, but that I paid a price for survival that I'm still paying now, at 90 years old, sitting in a house that's too quiet, talking to people I'll never meet, trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The RAF can keep their medals, the museums can keep their exhibits, the historians can keep their clean narratives. I'm keeping the messy truth, the truth that survival isn't always lucky, that skill isn't always a blessing, that doing what you must doesn't mean you're happy about it, that heroes are just people who wish they'd never been put in positions where heroism was necessary. I'm 90 years old. Most mornings I wake up surprised I'm still here. The crew is gone. The enemy pilots are gone. Ellen is gone. Soon I'll be gone too. And when I am, this story will become just another piece of history. Another footnote about remarkable improvisation under combat conditions. Another placard in a museum somewhere. But for now, while I'm still here, while I can still remember the smell of cordite and the cold of that turret and the face of a young German pilot who looked surprised to be dying, I wanted to tell it truthfully. Not as propaganda or entertainment or inspiration, just as it was. Terrible and necessary and something I'd never want anyone else to experience. The broken sight made me famous in small circles, made me someone people want to interview, to talk to learn from. But it also broke something in me that never quite healed. Some essential belief that my actions wouldn't have lasting consequences. Some innocence about what I was capable of doing to another human being. I'm grateful I survived. Grateful for the 60 years I had with Ellen. For my children and grandchildren. For the chance to live a full life that Wilhelm Becker and Tommy Rutherford never got. But I'm not grateful for the broken sight. It saved my life, but it cost me something I can't quite name. Some piece of myself that stayed at 15,000 feet over Germany, firing into the darkness, hoping I'd see the dawn. That's what I want people to understand. Not that war makes heroes. Conteneur 23.07. That war makes survivors, and survivors carry burdens. Heroes in movies never have to carry. We carry the faces of the people we killed. We carry the memories of friends who didn't make it home. We carry the weight of random chance. The lottery that said you live and you die and there's no reason beyond which way the bullet happened to fly. I'm tired now. Tired of remembering. Tired of trying to explain, tired of carrying this story for 7 decades. But I needed to tell it one more time, completely and honestly, before I can't tell it anymore. Needed to say Wilhelm Becker's name out loud, and acknowledge that he was real, that his death mattered, that the broken sight didn't just save 7 British lives, but ended 6 German ones. We talk about the cost of war in numbers. Lives lost, cities destroyed, economies ruined. But the real cost is in moments like these. An old man sitting alone, remembering a young man's face, wondering if things could have been different, knowing they couldn't have been, but wishing they could have anyway. That's what war costs. That's what the broken sight taught me. That's what I'll carry until the day I die. If someone reads this after I'm gone, I hope they understand that I'm not asking for sympathy or praise. I'm asking for recognition of complexity. War isn't simple. Survival isn't simple. Memory isn't simple. We're all just doing our best with broken tools in impossible situations, trying to make it through to the other side. I made it through. But the sight stayed broken. And maybe that's the way it should be. Maybe we're not supposed to see war clearly. Maybe the broken sight is the only honest way to view combat. Through shattered glass, aiming by instinct, never quite sure what you're hitting until it's too late to take it back. That's my story. The story of the broken sight. The story of 6 German pilots and 1 scared rear gunner who got lucky and spent the rest of his life wondering what luck really means. It's not a happy story or an inspiring story. It's just a true story. And truth, I've learned, is the only thing worth preserving. So remember it if you can. Remember that behind every statistic, every victory, every innovation, there are people. People with names and faces and families waiting for them. People who made choices in impossible circumstances and lived with those choices forever. People like Wilhelm Becker, people like Tommy Rutherford, people like me. Remember us not as heroes or villains, but as humans who found ourselves in a war we didn't start, doing things we never imagined we'd have to do, carrying the weight of it long after the shooting stopped. That's the truth of the broken sight. That's the truth of war. That's the truth I've carried for 70 years, and I'm leaving it here in these words, for whoever comes after. The sight was broken, but I could still see. Could see too much, maybe. Could see things I wish I hadn't. But I survived. And survival means bearing witness. So here's my witness. Here's what I saw through the broken sight. Here's what it cost. Here's what it meant. Remember it, learn from it, and for God's sake, don't romanticize it. That's all I have left to say. Pod continuar, com o rotero 23, now. I thought I was finished. Thought I'd said everything that needed saying. But my grandson came by last week and asked me something that made me realize there's more to the story. He asked if I'd ever gone back to Germany, if I'd ever seen the places I'd flown over, the cities I'd helped bomb, the country that had been our enemy. I told him no. Told him I'd spent 70 years avoiding Germany like it was cursed ground. He asked why. I didn't have a good answer. Fear, maybe. Guilt. The sense that I wouldn't be welcome there. That people would look at me and see a man who'd killed their fathers, their grandfathers, their sons. But he kept pushing. Said Klaus had invited me a dozen times before he died. Said his daughter still extended the invitation. Said maybe there was something there I needed to see. I'm 90 years old. Don't have many years left for putting things off. So last spring I finally went. Flew into Munich. Klaus's daughter Anna picked me up at the airport. She looks like her father. Has his eyes. Has Wilhelm's eyes too, I suppose. 3 generations removed from the man I killed, but carrying his genes forward into a world he never got to see. She drove me to her home in a small town outside Munich. The same town Wilhelm came from, same streets he walked, same church where he was supposed to get married. His fiancée's grave is in the cemetery there. Anna took me to see it. Maria Schreiber, 1923-2010. Beloved daughter, faithful heart. The stone next to hers has Wilhelm's name, even though his body was never recovered. Just his name and dates and the word vermisst, missing. I stood there in that German cemetery and felt the weight of it all over again. This woman had waited, had hoped, had written letters to a dead man for 43 years because hoping was better than accepting. And I was the reason she'd had to hope. I was the reason his body was never found. I'd shot him down over Holland and he'd crashed somewhere in the darkness, and that was that. Anna put her hand on my shoulder. Said her father had told her I would blame myself, but that I shouldn't. That war made victims of everyone. That Wilhelm had been trying to kill me just as hard as I'd been trying to kill him. That someone had to lose and someone had to win, and neither outcome would have been good. I appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't change anything. Maria Schreiber had died alone because of what I did. That's just a fact. We went to Anna's house after. She'd prepared dinner. Her husband was there, a kind man named Joseph who taught mathematics at the local school. Their 2 children, teenagers, polite and curious. They asked questions about the war, about flying, about what it was like to shoot without a sight. I answered as honestly as I could. Told them it was terrifying and desperate, and not at all like the movies make it seem. The daughter, who was 16 and studying English, asked if I was proud of what I'd done. I told her the same thing I'd told my grandson. Proud wasn't the right word. I was glad I'd survived, glad I'd protected my crew. But proud suggested I was happy about it, and I wasn't. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe the younger generation understands moral complexity better than we give them credit for. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jet lag, unfamiliar bed, ghosts. I sat by the window looking out at the German countryside. Moonlight on fields, a peaceful scene. Hard to believe this place had been enemy territory once. Hard to believe I'd flown over land like this with bombs in our belly, ready to destroy whatever we were told to destroy. Hannah found me there around 3 in the morning. Asked if I was okay. I told her the truth. Said I was thinking about all the ways history could have gone differently. If Germany hadn't started the war, if Britain hadn't fought back, if my sight hadn't broken, if Wilhelm had been a worse pilot, or I'd been a worse gunner. All the tiny decisions and accidents that led to him dead and me alive. She sat with me. We talked for hours. She told me about Wilhelm's letters home, the ones that had been saved, how he'd written about wanting the war to end, how he'd described the fear of going up night after night knowing each mission might be his last. How he'd told his family he was fighting, not because he believed in the cause, but because his country had asked him to, and he didn't know how to say no. I told her about Tommy Rutherford, about his girl and her cherry pie, about how he'd talked endlessly about the future he wanted to have, about how he'd died 2 months after I'd shot down her grandfather, about how random and stupid it all seemed looking back. Good men dying for reasons that seemed important then, but felt hollow now. She asked if I thought it was worth it. The war, the sacrifice, the millions dead. I told her I didn't know. We'd stopped Hitler. That was worth something. But the cost had been so high, and the world we'd built after wasn't perfect, still had wars, still had hatred, still had young men dying for old men's decisions. So maybe we'd won the war, but lost something else. Something about our collective humanity. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The next day, Anna took me to a museum in Munich. They have an exhibit about the air war over Germany. Photographs of bombed cities, stories of civilians who died in the raids, statistics about how many tons of bombs fell, how many buildings were destroyed, how many people were killed or displaced. I walked through that museum and saw the war from the other side, saw what my bombs had done, what our campaign had cost German families. There was a photograph of Hamburg after the firebombing. Just rubble. Miles and miles of rubble. 40,000 people dead in a single night. I hadn't been on that raid, but I'd been on others like it. Had dropped bombs on cities full of people who weren't soldiers, weren't fighting anyone, just living their lives until the air raid sirens started and the bombs began falling. A woman approached me in the museum. She was old, maybe 85. She'd seen me looking at the Hamburg photograph. She asked in broken English if I'd been in the war. I told her yes, British, RAF. She nodded. Told me she'd been in Hamburg that night. Was 13 years old. Lost her mother, her 2 brothers, her home. Spent the rest of the war living with relatives, scared every time she heard planes overhead. I didn't know what to say. Started to apologize. She stopped me. Said she didn't need an apology. Said the war had been terrible for everyone. Said her own father had been a soldier, had died on the Eastern Front fighting the Russians. Said they'd all been victims of men who'd wanted power and glory and had sacrificed millions to get it. Said she was glad I'd survived, that every survivor was a witness, that witnessing mattered. We stood there together, 2 old people who'd been on opposite sides of a war 70 years earlier, both carrying scars that had never quite healed. She asked about my experiences. I told her about the broken sight, about Wilhelm, about Tommy. She listened and nodded, and when I finished, she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Suffering doesn't have a nationality. That pain in English sounds the same as pain in German, that we'd all lost something in that war, and the only way to honor the loss was to remember honestly." I thought about that conversation for days afterward. Suffering doesn't have a nationality. Such a simple observation, but so profound. I'd spent 70 years thinking about the war in terms of us and them. British and German, allies and Axis, good and evil. But this woman saw it differently. Saw it as humans suffering together. Saw that the 13-year-old girl in Hamburg and the 19-year-old gunner over the Ruhr had both been victims of the same larger tragedy. Anna arranged for me to visit an airfield where they have restored aircraft. They had a Messerschmitt Bf-110, the same type that had attacked us that night. I asked if I could sit in the gunner's position. They said yes. I climbed up, settled into the seat. It was cramped, cold, uncomfortable, just like my Lancaster turret. The gun sight was intact on this one. I looked through it, tried to imagine being a German gunner, looking for British bombers, knowing that shooting them down meant killing the men inside. It wasn't different from what I'd done. Not really. Different uniform, different flag, different language, but the same fear, the same desperation, the same terrible mathematics of kill or be killed. The broken sight had forced me to shoot by instinct, but these German gunners had the same instincts, had the same training, were doing the same job from the other side. I climbed back down, thanked the museum staff. Anna drove me back to her house. We had dinner again with her family. Her son asked if seeing the Messerschmitt had been difficult. I told him yes, but necessary, that I needed to understand what it had been like for the men I'd fought. That understanding didn't erase what I'd done, but it added context, made it more human. Joseph, Anna's husband, asked a question nobody had asked before. He asked if I'd ever tried to find the families of the other 5 pilots I'd shot down that night. I told him no, that I hadn't known their names, that the RAF hadn't kept those kinds of records, that I'd only connected with Wilhelm's family because Klaus had reached out to me. He suggested I try. Said there were databases now, researchers who specialized in tracking down information about war casualties. Said if I wanted to know more about the men I'd killed, the information might be available. I wasn't sure I wanted to know, wasn't sure I could handle 5 more Maria Schreibers, 5 more families shaped by my survival. But part of me felt I owed it to them, owed them at least the acknowledgement of their humanity. Anna helped me contact a historian who specialized in Luftwaffe records. Gave him the date, location, and approximate time of the engagement. He said he'd see what he could find. I flew back to England a few days later, left Germany with a strange mix of emotions. Grief, certainly. Guilt. But also something like peace. Like I'd finally faced the place and people I'd been avoiding for 70 years. 3 months later, the historian sent me a report. He'd found records for 4 of the 5 other pilots. Names, ages, service records, family information. I sat at my kitchen table reading about men I'd killed but never knew. Lieutenant Heinrich Kruger, age 23, from Berlin. Married 8 months before he died. His wife remarried in 1948, but named her first son Heinrich. He'd be in his 70s now. My kill had created him in a sense. His mother had honored a dead man by giving his name to a child with a different father. Oberleutnant Franz Weber, age 26, from Hamburg. Ironically killed by a British rear gunner the same week his city was being destroyed by British bombers. Had 2 daughters, ages 4 and 6, both survived the war. Weber's younger daughter became a teacher, spent her career educating students about the dangers of fascism and nationalism. The historian had interviewed her. She said her father's death had shaped her entire life, had made her determined to work for peace. Feldwebel Otto Schneider, age 31. The oldest of the pilots I'd killed. From a small town in Bavaria, career military, had served since 1935, 3 children. His widow never remarried, raised the children alone. The oldest son became a Lutheran pastor, preached about reconciliation and forgiveness, had visited England in the 1970s as part of a peace delegation. Unteroffizier Kurt Meyer, age 20, the youngest, from Cologne. Mother had begged him not to join the Luftwaffe. He'd enlisted anyway, thought it was his duty, thought it would make his father proud. His father had died in the First World War. Kurt died in the Second. 2 generations of one family lost to German militarism. His mother lived until 1978, never recovered from losing both husband and son to wars she'd opposed. The 5th pilot remained unknown. Records were incomplete. He'd probably been shot down, but there was no confirmation, no name, no family, just a ghost. Another young man who'd climbed into a fighter one night and never came back. I wrote letters to the families, not apologizing exactly because war is what it was, but acknowledging, saying their names, telling them what I knew about that night, offering to speak with them if they wanted to know more, to answer questions, to be a witness to how their fathers and grandfathers and brothers had died. 2 families responded, Weber's daughter and Kruger's namesake son. We exchanged several letters. Eventually, I went back to Germany to meet them. That was last year. I'm 91 now. Making these trips isn't easy, but it felt important. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Weber's daughter was 72. Sharp, intelligent, kind. She'd become everything her father hadn't lived to see. She showed me photographs of him. He looked serious in his uniform. But there was another photo, a casual one, where he was laughing, playing with his daughters in a garden somewhere. He looked young and happy and human, not like an enemy, like a father. She asked me to tell her what happened. I did. Described the attack, the broken sight, the moment I'd fired and seen his fighter go down. She listened without interruption. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you." I asked what she was thanking me for. She said for making her father real to me, for seeing him as a person instead of just a target, for caring enough 70 years later to come find his family and tell them what had happened. We spent 3 days together. She showed me Hamburg, showed me the memorial to the victims of the firebombing, showed me the church where her father was memorialized even though his body had never been recovered. We talked about the war, about memory, about how to live with the past. She said something I'll never forget. She said the worst thing about war isn't the death, it's the not knowing. The mothers who never learned what happened to their sons. The wives who spent decades wondering if maybe somehow their husbands were still alive somewhere. The children who grew up with ghosts instead of fathers. I met Heinrich Kruger Jr. in Berlin. He was 79, retired engineer, never knew his namesake. His mother had died when he was young. He'd grown up with stories about a heroic pilot who died defending the fatherland, the usual propaganda.